Hey, this is Michael with Better Life Advice. Our mission here is to help you obtain the knowledge needed in order for you to more deeply understand what drives toxic behavior and toxic relationships. Today's video, we're talking about 3 reasons we choose toxic relationships. Well, first off, we have to define what a toxic behavior is. Because whenever we talk about toxic relationships, it's not just one person involved. We have multiple people involved, possibly even 2 or more to a relationship. Usually we find that toxic behavior drives us not only to attract other toxic behavior individuals or people or even groups that show and express toxic tendencies. Well, let's get into what exactly toxic behavior is. Toxic behavior often represents an inability to feel genuine understanding and compassion for the other person. Now, I'm going to give a few examples here. So what are we talking about? Toxic behavior often represents an inability to feel genuine understanding and compassion for the other person. So typically, this has to do with feeling into another person's emotions. And whenever we talk about emotions, we're talking about their emotional state. So if one fails to feel another person's feelings, and whenever I'm talking about that, I'm talking about if they're angry, if they're showing signs of sadness, depression, anxiety, and say you have 2 people within a relationship and one of them is feeling those anxious feelings, it might even be a panic attack, and they've been dealing with this for a while. Now, if the person whom is on the other end of that, in that relationship, you could say it is deemed toxic if that other partner fails to feel genuine understanding and compassion for that other person dealing with the anxieties. So it is empathetic, because we're talking about empathy here. So if you're not being empathetic, that could perhaps be a definite solution to understanding how to be solution-oriented in the equation, because we're talking about 2 people living separate lives, coming together, and if one of those people within that party or relationship doesn't even have the honest intention to genuinely understand the other person's feelings and state of mind, we have a toxic behavior. So that's classified as a toxic behavior. It is simply choosing to not be compassionate. It is choosing to not feel into those emotions of the other person and not caress and not be there for that person. And there's different ways that we can get into in the future videos, ways to combat that and actually counter. And we're going to work on these toxic behaviors together as a community. But this is more so the knowledge part. Now, I'm going to give a few examples here before we move on to the 3 reasons we choose toxic relationships. So I'm going to go over number 1, number 2, number 3. But first, let's head back to what a toxic behavior is. And the first example here is when a person is dismissing or dismissive of the real needs and concerns of their partner or of a partner. This could be in a family household. This could be in a business relationship. This could be in an intimate relationship. This could be in a codependent relationship. This could be in a toxic relationship, an abusive relationship. You can see this on a very wide scale of relationship classifications. So the next example we have is covering truths to prevent losing the relationship. So another toxic behavior, because we went through the first one, dismissing the real needs and concerns of their partner. That's deemed as a toxic behavior. That's classified as toxic behaviors. That's how we know that we are toxic. Like if we are the ones who are toxic, now we know that we are the ones who are toxic. Or you might be somebody watching this or listening to this video, and you're needing to decipher for yourself if you're involved in a toxic relationship. Now, if you are, continue to listen, because we're going to continue to learn how to deal with toxic behaviors. But first, we have to inform ourselves on what exactly toxic behaviors are. So it's whenever somebody's covering truths, they're covering the real truth to prevent losing the relationship. Because, see, they might still value the relationship, guys. It doesn't mean that they don't value the relationship, but there might be narcissistic and very self-centered, manipulative reasons and intentions of a person. Now, it doesn't make, this is a misconception. It doesn't make the person whom is exuding the toxic behavior, it doesn't make them bad, because we like to judge. It doesn't make those people exuding those behaviors and tendencies a bad person. It just means that they're lost. It means that they don't understand who they are, and they don't understand. Many of these people who are a part of these toxic relationships, including myself, I've been a part of many. That's one reason why I'm making these videos, to inform myself and others on ways to adapt and cope ourselves in order to better understand ourselves, so that we can better understand others and go about changing our lives in a positive way through learning and knowledge and understanding. But it doesn't make these people bad, because all of us exude very selfish tendencies from time to time. So another example is a person might be in a state where they have learned a practice of denial in order to get their needs met. Now, how big is that one? Think about that. They become entranced, perhaps subconsciously, through a pattern of habits over a period of weeks, months, years. They've learned the practice of denial in order to get their needs met. So it doesn't matter if they're lying to you. As long as they're meeting their needs, then they're fine. Like, even if they're being toxic, think about that. Like, toxic behaviors, toxic relationships, if you have to lie to get your needs met, if you have to lie in order to maintain a relationship, then you might do that. And if you find yourself or have found yourself in these situations, you might want to consider studying this material a little bit more so that you can be better equipped in knowing what you're dealing with, because it's a very serious topic. It's a very serious issue that we're talking about here. So narcissistic tendencies, it's all about me. It's all about me. You know, whenever you're dealing with a narcissist sort of person, once again, that falls under the category of toxic behavior. That's a toxic relationship. Now, you can have narcissistic tendencies and not being in a relationship. So think about that one. Because you could just straight up be a very narcissistic, self-centered person and not have good relationships. But now you know, through studying these videos, that we're dealing with toxic relationships, even if that's just with ourselves alone. So they have an all about me mentality, if you will. They are very self-centered. This is toxic behavior. And the next example, last example, before we get into the 3 reasons we choose toxic relationships, the next one is they have they generally have no standards. If you're a toxic person and you're exuding toxic behaviors, once again, it's classified as little to no standards, only meet my needs. There's no integrity. You will find, if you are exuding these toxic behaviors, you will often find any and all means to have your needs met. So we talked about that. You're going to cover truths to prevent losing the relationship because you're so concerned about meeting your selfish needs. And guys, I want to point this out. It does not make you a bad person, especially if you're a narcissistic person watching this. Because I've struggled with these tendencies, and many others have struggled with the same behaviors. So let's not beat ourselves up. That's the whole point of this, is that we're not beating ourselves up, but we're learning what we're doing. Because at least if we're facing the truth, we are better suited to eventually have a better relationship with ourselves. Because think of that. You might not like what you're hearing, and you might not like to face the truth. But know that nobody's judging you. Nobody's judging you. Nobody's pointing fingers. Because we're studying this together. So do you understand and do you see how powerful that is? When we don't point fingers and we're simply standing back and viewing this in a third person perspective, appropriate perspective. And this is take this almost as an enlightenment of sorts. So let's go ahead and get into the 3 reasons we choose toxic relationships. So in this video, we went over already what is classified exactly or what constitutes a toxic behavior. We gave several examples. And now we're getting into the 3 reasons. So number 1 reason we choose toxic relationships is we believe we deserve to be frequently abused and or punished. Now, I'm going to briefly go into and dive into each one of these in a subtopic form. Okay? So number 1 reason we choose toxic relationships is because we believe on a very intimately deep subconscious level, we honestly believe that we deserve to be frequently abused and or punished. So what exactly does this stem from? Usually we form a belief based on life experiences through a period of years. Now, this could have happened in our childhood. We could have been abused. We could have been treated unfairly. We could have had from a parent or friends or guardian or whoever that we were around in our immediate environment, maybe even school, if we were dealing with bullies or really, typically you get friends or family. Usually it comes from friends or family, but they invalidate your feelings, and that's an emotional abuse. So we believe we deserve to be frequently abused because we were conditioned that through our early life experiences, or maybe you went through it later on in life, you were conditioned to believe that you didn't deserve anything better. So you just settle. Once again, think about it. As long as you're getting your needs met, that is still a toxic behavior, but at least we know now it is a toxic behavior. We need to form, why is it a toxic behavior? Because simply put, we need to form a healthy relationship with ourselves. And the step that a lot of us are missing is actually seeing the real truth and talking about what exactly is a toxic behavior. And then we point out the 3 reasons why we choose the toxic relationships or why we choose the toxic behaviors. We find ourselves in a period of a habit or a series of habits that are toxic. And that's what leads us to attract other people who are toxic. That's why for a lot of us, we continue to see dead in the water results. And you might be completely comfortable in a toxic relationship. In fact, most are. If you are exuding toxic behaviors or have known others who exude toxic behaviors and who have continuously put themselves in toxic relationships, it's a deep emotional trauma that you might say is trying to fix in oneself. That's why we have to study this and see all this material that we're talking about as being very much based in fact. But we don't judge ourselves. That's what we do different here. On this channel, we're not judging anything. We're just simply standing back or sitting back, however you want to put it, and we're seeing the picture from the outside in, not judging. Because this is a channel to help us. So we covered number one. Number two, the number two reason we choose toxic relationships is that living an ordinary life is too mundane. Living an ordinary life is too mundane. I'm not going to go into this one because that's pretty self-explanatory, and I want to begin wrapping this video up. We're nearly at 20 minutes. But living an ordinary life is too mundane. It's something about needing emotionally available individuals or circumstances or experiences that really spark that heavy, excited emotion in us. And if we don't have those emotional buttons pressed, even if we are dealing with a toxic person, even if somebody is cheating on us, we go back, someone who is deemed toxic or through these toxic behaviors might find themselves in these situations where they might forgive easily, not hold themselves to any standards as long as their needs are being met, which again is not bad, but at least we understand what's happening. But they're not okay with living an ordinary life. There must be something happening. There must be some sort of drama. There must be twists and turns, just like a roller coaster. You wouldn't go on a roller coaster if it was just straight across the whole time, from start to finish. Would you? Think about it. You would not even step foot on that roller coaster. You go and ride roller coasters because of the ups and downs, because of the twists and turns. Because sometimes you can see level, and other times it's pitch black entirely. And you're going through a tunnel and you can't even see. But you're hearing a lot of noise and you're freaking out. And sometimes you're upside down going through a loop. And life's throwing a whirl at you. We need those emotional buttons pushed because we are not living an ordinary life. Because most of our life was our needs not being met. Do you see what I'm talking about? So we need to be emotionally charged. We need to be filled. That's what we're talking about. But my work on this channel is much different because we're not judging that. Because, guys, let me tell you, I've dealt with this and I'm still dealing with many issues. And that's okay because nobody's perfect. But at least it's relatable. This is relatable content. This is the type of content that we're going to be putting out. Relatable content without judgment, but we are going to be helping each other through this. It's okay. I'm here to let you know it's okay. So, the third reason, let's go ahead and wrap this video up. The third reason we choose toxic relationships is, here's number 3. We want to avoid forming a meaningful relationship with ourselves. Did you catch it? We want to avoid forming a meaningful relationship with ourselves. So, you know how we were talking about how we want others to fill us? And we just feel so filled up. We can finally relax, which isn't a bad thing. It's actually healthy in certain forms and certain perspectives. But many of us in society, through conditioning, have called these relationships toxic or codependent. And I'm not saying all of them are healthy, guys. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not trying to make excuses for these types of behaviors and traits. I'm talking about number 3. The third reason we choose toxic relationships is because we're trying to avoid forming a meaningful relationship with ourselves. Well, what are we doing here? Through these videos, we're actually forming a meaningful relationship with ourselves because we're getting to know ourselves. We are stopping the whole passing judgment on ourselves for having these toxic behaviors and traits. So this in and of itself, just even watching this, just even listening to this, you are becoming aware. I'm becoming aware. We are all becoming aware. In step 1, we have to get the knowledge. We have to become aware in order to change anything if we're ever to change for the better. And we're ever to, really, it comes down to forming a meaningful relationship with ourselves. But a toxic tendency is that we avoid that. And it doesn't mean to live in social isolation. It doesn't mean to avoid people. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we can have friends and we can rely on others. We're told that it's bad to rely on others. That's untrue. We can still rely on others, as long as they're not also tearing us down. But we also have to look in the mirror. That's what we're viewing about ourselves. This is the work right here. This is the work. We are forming a better relationship with ourselves right now. As you're listening, we're doing it right now. We're becoming better right now. This isn't happening later. This is all about the present moment. This is all about capitalizing on hearing this knowledge, hearing this information over and over and over again, so that we can see clearly what our issues are. And that in and of itself is loving. That's a loving trait. That's a loving way to live. That's a loving behavior. Because now you're becoming interested in the truth about others and the truth about ourselves. So instead of, like we talked about number 3, instead of avoiding a meaningful relationship with ourselves, we're facing ourselves in an appropriate fashion, but also very honest and truthful fashion. So in this video, that goes, I'm going to go ahead and just wrap this up. But this was 3 reasons we choose toxic relationships. I'll see you in the next video.